Public Media.
Jax Chamber, with 3,000 members in Northeast Florida, is dedicated to driving economic growth and ensuring everyone has the opportunity to succeed. Membership offers business leaders opportunities to connect with each other and with the community. More at jaxchamber.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and on today's First Coast Connect, we look at the biggest stories of the week. Today, perp walks for kids and parents as law enforcement ratchets up its response to school threats. Nearly 1 in 6 Duval voters has been deemed inactive, a huge increase in just 3 years. A community fed up with late-night crime agrees to pay for police themselves, and parents and teachers are warned their schools could soon be closing. Our panel of journalists will talk about all that and more. Then, the fight against heart disease hits the streets in an effort to garner attention and funding. Join the conversation. You can reach us on air at 904-549-2937. You can also email comments or questions to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. And you can reach out on social media. It's all ahead this hour after the day's news.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. With Election Day less than 7 weeks away, Vice President Harris was campaigning in Michigan last night. As NPR's Asma Holland reports, Harris joined Oprah Winfrey for a virtual event near Detroit.
Harris sat down in conversation with Oprah in front of a few hundred invited guests. Among them were the mother and sister of a young woman in Georgia named Amber. ProPublica reported this week that Amber died after complications from an abortion. She did not receive a necessary procedure promptly after abortion access was limited in the state. Harris said the story highlights the health care crisis that has been created after the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade.
Amber's mom shared with me that the word over and over again in her mind is preventable.
Yeah.
Preventable.
Harris is traveling to Georgia later today to speak more on the issue. Asma Khalid, NPR News.
Former President Donald Trump spoke to the Israeli-American Council yesterday. He said that if he loses the presidential election, Jewish people in the U.S. will have a lot to do with that. He also warned Israel will cease to exist as a nation if he does not win. Trump also declared his support for Israel. Investigators have disclosed more details on the suspect in the apparent assassination against Trump. NPR's Tovia Smith reports Ryan Ruth was known in his hometown of Greensboro, North Carolina, for his numerous run-ins with law enforcement.
Ruth's rap sheet runs the gamut, from traffic violations to possessing weapons of mass destruction. Now retired police officer Eric Rosecki says he had 100-plus run-ins with Ruth, whom he describes as a cocky guy with delusions of grandeur who was being taken down by a drug habit. Rosecki says when he heard Ruth was the suspect in the apparent assassination attempt, he wasn't entirely shocked.
Considering how things were progressively going downhill with him, it does make sense. The dots kind of connect, and I can see where this could have actually happened.
Family members did not respond to multiple requests, but a son has said he rejects the idea that Ruth would do anything so crazy, much less violent. Tovia Smith, NPR News, Greensboro, North Carolina.
Britain is repeating its call for its citizens to leave Lebanon following this week's deadly attacks involving exploding electronics targeting members of Hezbollah. NPR's Lauren Frayer is in London.
The UK government has been advising citizens to leave Lebanon for more than a month. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy reiterated that after meeting his US counterpart Antony Blinken in Paris and speaking with Lebanon's Prime Minister Najib Mikati. In their call, Lammy says he expressed deep concern over rising tensions and civilian casualties in Lebanon.
NPR's Lauren Frayer reporting. On Wall Street in pre-market trading, stock futures are mixed. The Dow is up by 20. This is NPR.
And this is WJCT News 89.9 in Jacksonville. It's 9:04 right now. Work will begin soon to turn the former Sunray Cinema into 5 Points into a music venue. The city's reviewing permits for interior demolition in preparation for the new venue called Five to open in a few months. Five has announced country singer Zach Top is going to headline shows on March 5th and 6th, according to the Jacksonville Daily Record. Thousands of families in the Jacksonville area are newcomers because one or both spouses are in the U.S. Navy or other military branch and they're transferred to a new base. So this weekend, the 5-year-old nonprofit Blue Star Families is hosting local events to support those military families and make them welcome. The agency will host a block party downtown Saturday for families, plus STEM workshops for their middle school-aged daughters at FSCJ's downtown campus. Blue Star spokesperson Caitlin Gillen says it's all part of a national welcome week.
These events are designed to bring together the military and civilian communities, specifically to welcome military families to those communities to ensure a greater sense of belonging. Blue Star Families has some really interesting data around the role of belonging plays in stuff like military retention, likelihood to remain in the service, to recommend the service.
Welcome Week was created to recognize the 600,000 military families who move to new communities each year. It's 75 degrees now. Coastal flood advisory.
For NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Indeed, designed to be an end-to-end hiring solution for businesses of all sizes to attract, interview, and hire candidates, all from one platform. Learn more at Indeed.com/NPR.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Opinions expressed on the First Coast Connect Week in Review are those of our panelists and do not reflect the views of WJCT News 89.9.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and it's Friday, which means it's time for our First Coast Week in Review. Among our topics, a regional crackdown on kids making school threats. The school district releases a list of 7 possible school closures. Thousands of Duval voters are one election away from being removed from the voter rolls. And a Riverside neighborhood agrees to pay out of pocket for police protection. To talk about all that and more, I am joined now by Will Brown, race and poverty reporter at Jacksonville Today. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Ann.
Ashley Harding, reporter and anchor at News4Jax. Good morning.
Good morning, Ann.
Riley Phillips joining us for the first time, anchor and reporter with First Coast News. Welcome, Riley.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
And Ben Becker, anchor and reporter with Action News Jax. Hey, Ben.
Good morning, Ann.
So, Riley, I want to start with a story that you've been covering. It's part of a wave of student arrests following really a flood of social media threats against schools. So this is, of course, in the wake of this fatal shooting in Appalachia, Georgia. What have you been reporting on locally?
Yeah, so it kind of started about 2 weeks ago. We had a threat in Duval County on a Friday. Then there was a threat in Georgia in Ware County over the weekend. 3 threats within 48 hours in Columbia County. And then Sheriff T.K. Waters held a press conference. Columbia County Sheriff's Office held a press conference on the same day, just kind of letting people know these threats are happening. They're going to take things seriously. And they're going to, punish the kids. And then kind of all came to a head this past weekend with the Volusia County Sheriff. He went viral for his stance now on how he's going to be handling these arrests. And he said, parents, if you're not going to parent your kids, I am. He's going to post the mugshots, post perp walks of these kids. And he stayed true to that on Monday. That was his first perp walk of an 11-year-old getting out of the squad car in handcuffs.
Let's hear a little bit from Sheriff Chitwood of Volusia County.
Since parents, you don't want to raise your kids, I'm going to start raising them. Every time we make an arrest, your kid's photo is going to be put out there. And if I could do it, I'm going to perp walk your kid so that everybody can see what your kid's up to.
So he defended his decision on Monday to release the full name, the mugshot, and a video of an 11-year-old boy being taken to a jail cell on social media, Riley. what happened in the instance of this 11-year-old? What do we know about that arrest, and what has the community reaction been?
I believe there were some sort of guns recovered. I don't believe they were real guns, but there were guns recovered. He made some sort of threat that he was going to bring the guns to school or something of that nature. And I mean, looking on social media comments, I would say majority are in favor of this, of, you know, parents need to take responsibility for their children's actions. I think there are some people who think this might be too far because the child is 11 years old. He might not realize what he's doing, the threat that he's making, and how harmful it is. So maybe there needs to be more compassion there. But I would say the majority of people, at least on social media, are backing Sheriff Chitwood.
Yeah, it does seem in all of these county Facebook pages, Ashley Harding, that the majority of comments, and that may just be a factor of kind of how Facebook is and how it works, but largely supportive, and praising the sheriffs for taking this stance. Do we have any sense as to whether there are actually measurably more incidents occurring, whether we're just being told about them because sheriffs are trying to send this message?
Well, I think given what has happened and we're seeing more of it and there's more awareness to this, I almost wonder if that's playing a role in it. And as far as there being more incidents, I'm honestly not sure because I haven't seen the scale there, but I do feel like the heightened awareness since what happened in Georgia may or may not be factoring into our thoughts about it. And I know that we've heard from our viewers, quite a few of them were praising the sheriff's response and saying that an example does need to be set because this is happening more. And number one, it seems like these kids don't understand how serious this is. This really can impact your future down the line. This is something that could follow. And I also want to point out, I feel like I have a son in the 3rd grade. I feel like things of this nature are also a distraction in the classroom. They're a distraction in the education environment.
Sure. Will, to Ashley's point, these mugshots likely will follow these kids for a long time. And it isn't just the 11-year-old in Volusia County. There was an 11-year-old, there was a couple of 11-year-olds arrested in Putnam County this week, 13, 14, a 15-year-old in St. Johns County. And really every county in Florida has seen some sort of level of this.
It's, to Ashley's point, it is a distraction in the classroom, but I would hope that law enforcement agencies kind of understand that there is a massive difference between an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old, and there's a difference between a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, and kind of govern themselves accordingly because 11-year-old's a 5th grader, and sometimes they speak before thinking. But to your wider point, I just think as a parent, my heart breaks for the children who are the classmates of these children who make these threats, and then my heart breaks for the children themselves because sometimes they're not growing up in great environments and they're surrounded by the idea that this is the way to solve a problem.
Yeah, some of these kids, we know that a couple of them, Ben, their parents have had some significant run-ins with law enforcement, and so it is perhaps a difficult environment for the kids.
Well, as a parent of a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, I mean, this hits close to home. And listen, there's no right answer in this situation. Like most things, on one hand, you have the sheriffs that have a responsibility to keep the schools safe for children, and we know what can happen at schools. On the flip side, we have to understand that, yes, they are 11 years old. Their brains aren't fully formed. They're not thinking these things through. They don't know the consequences of their actions. So you can see it from both sides. And on the one side, people will say these sheriffs possibly could be grandstanding right now. This opportunity to get attention, to bring awareness to their departments and themselves. But again, they do have an obligation to help protect the community, and that's where the dichotomy is here.
I mean, there is a difference, Ben. We know that the judicial system recognizes a difference between, a child's brain and an adult's brain. The U.S. Supreme Court has found that there is a measurable scientific difference, and that's why we have a Department of Juvenile Justice typically to handle these kind of cases and also typically offer a little shield to the younger people. And it's interesting that here in Jacksonville, TK Waters announced the arrests. One of the people arrested was an 11-year-old, but didn't choose to release those names and mugshots, even though he could have.
Right. And again, that's knowing the temperature in the room as well. We're seeing these perp walks. And from what I recall, unless, I don't follow Volusia County every single day, but are they doing perp walks for murderers and rapists and people like that? Or now just 11-year-olds? So again, what is the reaction? How do you measure it to what the crime is or what the possible crime may be? And again, that as a parent, that raises some concerns. But again, I can see why they respond the way they are. But again, what is right and what is wrong here?
We're talking about the week's big headlines with our panel of journalists, and we welcome your calls and comments. You can reach us at 904-549-2937. You can email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also tag us on social media, and if you want to watch us on YouTube, you can too. We're on YouTube and Facebook streaming right now. We've got a call from Les on the West Side. Good morning, Les. Go ahead.
Good morning. Great topic. I just had a question as to television stations. Are they compelled to show these minors, or can they refuse to show these mugshots? Thank you.
Thank you, Les. Riley.
I know our station, we chose not to show the mugshots. We blurred out the face of the 11-year-old in Volusia County who was perp walked. So we're still adhering to the standard that they are minors, so we're not going to show them.
And that's the station's choice. Ashley, what has your station been doing?
We do the same thing. We have not shown the mugshots either, and we did the same thing. We blurred the images of the children in those cell phone, I believe they were cell phone, but perp walk videos. Now, as far as showing minors in general, that is a conversation we have case by case. In the Aiden Fucci situation, of course, we showed his mugshot. He was 14 at the time. So it really, truly is, given the fact that they are children, we take extra care in determining what is newsworthy, what makes the most sense, and what we have that discussion. Is it beneficial to the viewer?
Mm-hmm. And Ben, I mean, obviously, Aiden Fucci stabbed somebody 100 and some odd times. These kids have made threats, but they didn't actually do anything in terms of acting on those threats.
That's correct. So, and as we mentioned here just now, that at Action News, we don't show the mugshots either, or the perp walks. We blur faces for the perp walks, but we don't show the mugshots of minors. And in a situation, if a minor is accused of a heinous crime like a murder, like in the Aiden Fucci situation, again, it's a case-by-case situation. We show his mugshot, of course. So, these are the difficult conversations we have in newsrooms each and every day when it comes to determining things like this. If you have someone who's 16 or 17, we may show a mugshot there as well, or we may not, right? It just depends. But, when it comes to 11-year-olds or 12-year-olds, unless somehow in a situation like this, if someone actually pulled a trigger, then it's a different conversation, perhaps.
Right. We've got a call from Adam in Murray Hill. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I just have a comment. As a parent myself of a preschooler, it's really frustrating, to hear that these threats are being made, but also that there's not a bigger conversation around all of these different events. I mean, these kids are surrounded by violence every day in school, and there's not a single conversation about gun reform or gun control, or the fact that so many conservative politicians are pushing violent narratives. January 6th was, considered not that big of a deal by a lot of conservative politicians. And that is what kids are watching. That's what kids are hearing about, and they just see it as normal. So, of course, things like these threats are only going to become more and more common. And, yeah, I'll take my comment off air.
Thanks, Adam. Will?
So, to Adam's point, earlier last week when a would-be assassin pointed a gun in the vicinity of President Trump, I have a 9-year-old child. Every single time that story was on the news, it was go to your room, because I'm like, you're too young to hear this. But not every parent does that. And I'm not saying I'm a perfect parent. I'm anything but to his point, yes, children are exposed to a lot of violence from a lot of different areas. I mean, video games, if you're not paying attention to what your child is consuming on the internet, they can go down rabbit holes and be exposed to violence within 3 minutes. So it is a lot on the parents, but we as a collective society have to pay attention to what our kids are doing. And when I say our kids, I mean all the kids. If you see a kid who's like 9, 10, 11 years old playing with a toy gun, it's like, ask yourself, why are they doing that?
We have an email from Susie. She says the decline of basic civility and lack of respect for all institutions that adults have been exhibiting for the past 10 to 15 years is not going unobserved by our young people. What we have here is simply the acorn doesn't fall far from the tree. And she continues, our children have been listening to their parents say F Biden and wear the T-shirts. Our children have heard conversations in the home about how government is out to get us. Our children have watched their parents hold up signs endorsing Nazis. So when a child makes a violent threat against the biggest government institution in their lives, the school, are we surprised? There is an environment that is, I think, markedly different, Ashley, than probably when you went to school, certainly than when I went to school.
Absolutely. You know, I was, I believe I was in sixth grade when Columbine happened. And I remember going back to school the next day. I remember how scary that was. And now, my 8-year-old son, it is normal for him to come home and talk to me about how he did an active shooter drill at school. That is astounding to me. And obviously, I believe social media plays such a big part in this. You know, social media, Facebook came, I think I was one of the first people to use Facebook, actually. 2005, fall semester of college. You still had to have an EDU email. See, he's laughing at me because it's a fact.
I was the same way, same boat.
Yes, we were probably the first ones to have really used Facebook, and you had to be in college. You had to have an EDU. Now anyone can have it, and it seems like people can post whatever. They can spread messages of division, spread messages of hate, spread messages of violence. And it is our response. I hate using cliches. You know, it takes a village. I think that's true. We all need to be mindful about the little people in the room with us. We need to be mindful about what we share, what examples we set, because children learn from adults, children learn from parents, and we really have to be careful. And we need to really take that message to heart, I believe. I fear every day with what my child is seeing and hearing when I'm not around. And I am proud to say that I am one big mama bear. I'm proud to say that.
We have an email from Mark. He says, I thought it was against the law to show a minor who has been involved in a crime. These sheriffs seem to be doing great at punching down on the vulnerable and powerless, but they are silent about the gun lobby, which is at the root of these problems. Ben, we talked about the fact that stations can elect or not to show these mugshots, but in terms of releasing them, there is a Florida law that allows for that if it's a felony that the child is facing charges of.
Well, clearly that the sheriff's office are allowed to release them if they so choose, and that's what they do. Is that what you're stating?
Well, I think he was asking, isn't it against the law? And my understanding is that the law allows for those to be released as public records if the juvenile is facing what would be a felony if committed by an adult.
Florida has very loose open record laws.
We do?
More so than yes, we do. I mean, sometimes it's hard to tell around here, right?
Right.
But yes, I mean, we are supposed to have them, right? But some agencies are more, open than others. I'll leave that there. But so yes, so those can be released. Now, in some states, it may not be the case. But here in Florida, they certainly are allowed to be released. Now it's up to the media to make those decisions as to whether they're going to show them or not. And, those are decisions we make. Now, as we know now, of course, the internet and everything else, those pictures get released and they live forever. So even if we don't show them, if those names get Googled down the line in 10 years when they're going to get a job or when they're going to college or anything else, it's going to pop and that could have, consequences.
Got a call from Tracy in Orange Park. Good morning, Tracy. Go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, ma'am. I was just curious to know if anybody has thought about putting the parents' pictures in the newspaper on the news. I think that would maybe be more effective than just even putting the children. We might need to shame some of these adults.
Thanks, Tracy. Riley.
So Sheriff Chitwood did say that as well, that he will also post the picture of the parents if they can prove that the parents knew about their child posting or knew, knew that something was going on and didn't act on it.
And sometimes it can take a little longer to put together a case like that against the parents. So if that were to happen, if they do get charged with something, that could happen further down the line.
I do feel like holding parents accountable in this type of situation is a relatively new frontier, so to speak, because remember the Crumleys in Michigan, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I am, isn't that the first time we actually heard of parents being charged in
Michigan,
connection
yeah,
with their
that was
son who carried out a
considered
school shooting?
kind of a landmark case, yeah.
Exactly. And
But of
then,
course, now in Georgia.
and now in Georgia, exactly. So I feel like overall holding parents accountable in this type of situation is a relatively new thing. Now, granted, the cases that we just mentioned, there was actual deaths. People were actually shot. We're talking about threats here. So I'd be interested to see if this actually comes to be, if we start to see more of this.
Susan on the South Side. Good morning, Susan. Go ahead.
Good morning. What I would like to hear also is that we know that a lot of the kids that engage in these school shootings have a history of this type of thing. So if they're getting threats, I'd like to hear from somewhere that either the Justice Department or the Sheriff's Department or the school system get these kids some help and find out why they find it necessary to post and perhaps prevent things that might happen in the future.
Thank you, Susan. We also have a call from Ed in Orange Park. Good morning, Ed. Go ahead.
Good morning. Yes, I wanted to just push back a little bit on the comment made about people saying F Biden, which is true, by the way, but but nobody mentioned that they're saying the same thing against Trump. They're saying the same thing against anybody connected to the MAGA movement, and they're saying the same things against anybody with a Republican, including insults like you're a Nazi, you're a fascist. Ironically, a week and a half ago, Harris, who was campaigning in Pennsylvania, she went to a pretty famous spice shop that's also do business online to talk, of all things, about divisiveness. And she did it in a store that in their website and in the front of the store has a sign that says, "We do not welcome Republicans or conservatives." Not Trump, not MAGA, but Republicans or conservatives. If we had the same type of business here with a sign against Democrats and liberals, I think everybody would be correctly a little bit upset.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I mean, obviously there is a lot of rhetoric on all sides that is difficult and probably does impact kids quite a bit. Biko in Springfield. Good morning, Biko.
Oh, good morning. Thank you.
Go ahead, Biko.
Yes, my question that I wanted to ask, what is the school system and the justice system are doing to prevent bullying? We know that bullying is the underlying cause of these kids making these threats. So what are we doing to stop bullying? Are we going to do anything to take bullying seriously in school?
Thanks, Biko. Ben, we do know that a lot of times these kids are responding to, their own issues in school, feeling like they've been mistreated or they have been mistreated.
Well, I know there's plenty of policies regarding bullying in schools locally and across the country. And we don't know in these instances whether bullying was involved or not. I've not heard of that, whether it's the 11-year-olds, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds who've been arrested. But at the end of the day, how much can you legislate out normal human behavior? You can try the best you can. It has many laws on the books about bullying or anything else, but kids are going to be kids, and kids are going to be mean to other kids. At the end of the day, you're going to have to find a way to talk to your child to have them be able to handle these things, give them the tools out of the toolbox, so to speak, to be able to stand up for themselves, to be able to talk their way out of situations, to feel good about themselves and make proper choices and not come home and feel like they're defeated and bullied at school, to be able to handle themselves. Because that's life. You're going to get bullied all through life, and there's not going to be enough rules to protect you. You have to be able to find ways to protect yourself.
Richard on the north side. Good morning, Richard. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for this great conversation. I'm going to try and be as brief as possible, but I'll say this. Right now in Duval County, there are over 50,000 children 5 years old and under. So right about now, there are 10,000 4-year-olds. And I've said this over and over again. I'm such a strong advocate for early childhood education that I can tell you where the next 14-year-old gang member is, or 14-year-old to make a crazy threat in school. I can tell you where he is right now. He's 4 years old in pre-K. Part of the reason why we cannot have a really good conversation about how to make this city a really great city is because we allow politics. And I was on hold when I heard it. I don't know exactly who said it, but that we can't legislate our way out of this. It always seemed to be legislation is the reason why we can't do something, but then we'll put a politician in office who pledges to do everything. And we're lying to ourselves and we're lying to our children. The reality of it is it's all connected. And the one thing that connects this thing is that we've been ignoring that real elephant in the room. We've never dealt with the race issue. We never dealt with the class issues. And we have so many other issues that we're not dealing with as our generation. And now we're shoveling it over onto our children. And our children are dealing with our mess the only way they know how. And it's showing up. And we can't walk our way out of this one. We've got to now face the issues that we've been ignoring. And that's really what I want to say.
Thanks, Richard. Ben Becker.
Yeah, I think part of what he's saying is we can't expect politicians to solve all of our problems. And I think some of us fall into that trap. Politicians make these promises. Your life's going to get better. It's going to change. It's like the preacher, put your hand on the screen and I'm going to heal you. It's not going to happen, folks. It's an opportunity for you to look at yourselves in the mirror. And we all have to do it each and every single day. And how do we make ourselves better? How do we make our families better? What can we do to affect that change personally? Because if you rely on somebody else to get it done for you, whether it's a politician, who's someone who wants your vote, or somebody who's selling you something, it's not going to happen. It's just not the road to go down.
A lot of news this week. I want to move on now to a story that Will covered that's causing big changes for voters in Duval County. So if you want to join the conversation, we invite you to call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email us at firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. But Will, tell us about what the changes are to Florida's election laws a few years ago and what's happening as a result.
So there have been a few election laws, but the biggest one was, Senate Bill 90, which looked into it shortened the window that someone could be have their vote by mail active. It also tightened up a little bit of the voter registration requirements. And in light of that, there are a number of people who kind of got ensnared in that and went from active to inactive voters. Now, locally, Supervisor of Election Jerry Holland says the biggest thing that creates inactive voters is they try and contact someone and they don't get a return. Like they try and contact someone through the mail and they don't get a return information. And so when they don't have an address, then it starts this process of trying to connect with someone. And if you go to federal elections without voting and they cannot contact you, then you become an inactive voter.
And you found that there's 90,000 voters, inactive voters in Duval County, which is about 15 out of every 100. What does it mean to be inactive? And does it impact their ability to vote?
If you are an inactive voter, you are still a registered voter. You can still vote in this year's election. No one can be removed from the voter rolls within 90 days of a presidential election, and we are, I think, 46 days from finding out who will replace our 46th president. So no one can be removed from the voter rolls this close to an election. And the second part of your question.
Well, just if you're designated as an inactive voter, eventually it has a consequence, right?
Yes, eventually you are removed from the voter rolls and you would have to re-register. But the people who are currently inactive would not be removed from the voter rolls until, I want to say, December or January. But if you vote in November, you become an active voter again. So, and
so people who are inactive, they're becoming inactive partly because sometimes they can't be reached, but also because they're missing voting in elections.
Mostly because they can't be reached. And Supervisor of Elections Jerry Holland stressed this to me earlier this week when I saw him after our story published, was that if you are an inactive voter or you might think your address might not be accurate on file, vote early, and that way the Supervisor of Elections can figure out you can still be eligible to vote. Your vote will still be counted, and the supervisor will be able to update your address so that going forward, you'll be good to go.
Ashley.
Yeah, I actually did this story yesterday, and these are the numbers that Jerry Holland gave me. That 90,000 number has actually dropped now to 89,243. This was as of yesterday. And first off, I didn't know there were so many other parties in Duval County. I had no idea. There's one with a single person. You're the chairman of your own party. How about
Wow.
that? Isn't that interesting, guys? But I think it's important to stress that I think it's our responsibility to be up on our voter registration, our voter status. And, one thing Jerry really stressed to me as well is go on the website and check your voter status. And I did it myself to see how it works. And it is very simple. You put your name, you put your birthday. It came up automatically and showed that I am an active voter registered in Duval County. And it showed where my voting precinct is. And, to his point about early voting, that can help so much. If you go to an early voting site, if there's an issue, it can be corrected, and then you can cast your ballot in the same visit. So I think it's important to share with listeners and viewers that this is a possibility, but take the advice and check your registration, check your status, and that's a good tool.
Riley, this is a military town, which is an often transient population. Of course, college kids also tend to move around a lot. And so there can be certain challenges that those groups face when it comes to staying current with an address in their location.
Yes, and I think when you're in the process of moving, you're not thinking of your voter registration. I think that's one of the last things we all think of when
Right.
we're moving.
Yeah.
So, it's understandable that this might fall to the wayside, and then people might not realize that they are inactive and that they've, missed several elections.
Yeah. Ben, this is not the first, issue that's been raised about voting access in Florida. Just this last week, a group filed suit challenging the constitutionality of a Florida law that says a voter's name must exactly match their driver's license or social security card. They say that 43,000 individuals across 26 Florida counties have never been able to register to vote because of this exact match requirement.
Well, critics would say to call it like it is. And they would say, look, this is a way to disenfranchise people from voting. This is a way to move people off the voter rolls who may not vote the way they want them to vote. Okay. And it won't impact this election, but it impacts elections down the line. So part of the problem is how do you activate people who feel disenfranchised who aren't voting, right? That's the core issue here because they feel like their needs aren't being met. And that's one of the problems right now. But once these people get moved off the rolls, well, number one, they probably aren't going to be voting anyway, even if they're still on the rolls. But once they're off, they're probably, they ain't coming back. And that's going to be an advantage for probably the Republican Party. That's what the critics would say of this type of law, this measure. And that's beneficial down the line. And statewide, Republicans now, I believe, have a million voter advantage, registered voter advantage, which based on this law, that's going to grow.
Yeah.
To that point, the organization that filed suit in terms of the exact voter match was Florida Rising. And for this story that we did about inactive voters, I spoke with former state senator Dwight Bullard, who's one of their senior political advisors, and he specifically went into the history of Jacksonville and the consolidated government. And because of that, that was one of the things that, in Bullard's words, crippled Black political power by creating a consolidated government. And he also mentioned that that's one of the reasons why that disenfranchised people feel they don't feel heard is because the failure to, again, directly quoting Bullard, the failure to build sidewalks, illegal dumping in Black neighborhoods. That's the historical context that frames our work. Close quote.
Consolidation, the claim there would be that because they were incorporating the entire county, which was much wider than sort of the core city, that would dilute the ability of the people in traditional Jacksonville to elect leaders that represented them.
One of the things about consolidation, when we had our 50th anniversary a few years ago, I asked a politician, I won't name them, but I said, hey, what about the broken promises of consolidation? And they looked me square in the eye and they said, oh, those promises aren't broken. They just haven't been fulfilled yet. I'm like, dude, it's been 50 years.
Wow.
What are you talking about? But other than it's a dude, I'm not naming who they were, but it was mind blowing having that conversation, and here we are still having a conversation about
Are
it.
they the artists behind some of the renderings that we see in Jacksonville? I mean, promises and unfulfilled. Let me
There's a lot of renderings.
Renderville.
Renderville.
Yes.
Well, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about these school closures. If you would like to weigh in, if you're impacted by this potential school closure yourself, you can join our conversation. You can call us at 904-549-2937, or you can email comments or questions to firstcoastconnect@wjct.org. You can also comment on Facebook, as many people have done so far this morning. Ashley, teachers and parents at 7 Duval County schools were informed this week that their schools are under consideration for closure at the end of this year and consolidation starting in the fall. Those include 6 elementary schools: Annie Morgan, Kings Trail, Don Brewer, Susie Tolbert, George Washington Carver, and Hidden Oaks. And then also the Young Men and Women's Leadership Academy at Eugene Butler Middle School would also close. What are we hearing from the community, the teachers, the parents, about this new proposed closure and consolidation list?
I'm glad you asked that question because we ask our viewers every day, is something impacting you? And we had a woman say that, a few years ago, she didn't have a car, and the school was on that list, was close enough that she could walk her, I think she said like second or third grader to school. If that school were to close and then be moved, the child would be moved to another one, she would have had no way to take her child to school. So that raises many, many questions. And we heard from another viewer said this would not impact me directly because my child's school is not on that list. But one of the schools that is, it's going to be consolidated into my child's school. So that could impact, things like class size, things like that. So really, this impacts a lot of people. And, I think what's really worth asking is what's leading to all this? A big part of it is enrollment is down. And we need to ask, why is enrollment down? I know that when I saw the headline the other day, I was not at work, and my anxious mind goes crazy, and I'm looking, make sure it's not my kid's school. It's not, but
Yeah. I think your station also did an analysis that found that most of these schools slated for closure are in
they are
urban districts, and that they would disproportionately will impact the Black community.
Black and Latino communities. Yes, ma'am. That's 100% right. I look at some of these schools. Susie Tolbert, that's right there in College Park. About 150 times a year, I see Susie Tolbert students walking to and from school. A lot of Susie Tolbert students walk right along the sidewalk on 13th Street with their families to go to school. SP Livingston is not close enough for those families to walk their child to school. I look at, Don Brewer. I think that's over in Arlington. Rufus E. Payne, George Washington Carver and Rufus E. Payne, those are in Northwest Jacksonville. These are overwhelmingly impacting Black and Latino neighborhoods and schools in a district that is about 59-60% Black and Latino. And based on previous years, I think the count for this year is the 20th day of school. I don't think that's been released yet. But since the pandemic, the people who have been leaving the school district are white kids. That's the demographic data that Duval County has put out. So the impact of the people who are leaving the district is being felt by the students who are staying in the district.
Ben, the school district is dealing with a huge hole in its budget, and that's sort of what's animating this decision, this effort. It's a $1.4 billion budget gap. But notably, not on this list is Atlantic Beach Elementary. That is a Beaches school that, when it was on the initially proposed possible list, animated a lot of people out there to protest. And perhaps people with more resources and time to devote to fighting back. What's going to happen now?
Well, a couple things. First off, I thought the half-cent sales tax was going to solve all of our problems, right? I saw Lenny Curry and Diana Green on TV telling us, hey, vote for this. It's going to make everything rainbows and unicorns. Clearly that didn't happen, did it?
Was that commercial backlit?
I mean, that I think that they would say that was kind of before costs got out of control. Construction pricing now is,
See,
twice what it
that's
was.
why when these things are pitched, every time they want to raise your taxes, you have to look and consider what are the unintended consequences. Also, what the future can hold. Right? They get you to agree to something in the present, but you don't know the future. And here's a classic example of that. So this isn't going to fill that nut. You got a $1.4 billion shortfall. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, so initially they come out with 30 schools that they want to whack. And now they're saying, well, it's going to be, 6 or 7. So either they were, way off initially on the amount of schools, or well, we're just going to do a Band-Aid right now, and then it's going to be progressive. They will do 7 this year, maybe 5 next year, and they'll do it in phases, right? Even if you end up doing 30, I don't see how you make up 1.4 billion. I talked to someone who's close to the school district, and I said, does this math add up? And he simply texted back to me, no. So you could close 30 schools, but that's not going to be $1.4 billion.
Yeah. We've got a call from Mark on the west side. Good morning, Mark. Go ahead.
Another thing I haven't heard these people say is, are we going to have another round of these school closings in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years? But my question was, I've been in Jacksonville all my life, and it seems like a few years ago we had a class size amendment statewide passed that limited class size, and they immediately started to play around fast and loose with some of those numbers. But I can't imagine that that's gone away, and I'm sure that this is going to impact that big time. So have they considered that?
It's a good question, Mark. I know, Ashley, that they have said that if these consolidations take place, that a couple of those schools would be sort of near capacity, but the others would mostly be about 3/4 full. And that is one of the things that's driving, as you said, these schools in particular being chosen because they have a very small, relatively small population of students.
Absolutely. And class size is a big concern, frankly. We saw what was going on in St. Johns County with class size. Do you remember all that when they had to start building more schools? And so, as far as playing fast and loose, I just don't know the answer to that. I know that my son's class size is relatively large.
Yeah.
It is. And I do worry about distractions. I worry about lots of things. But I also know that, his school's doing the best it can. It's very, very crowded.
I mean, in my experience, I think that they basically got around that by expanding the class size and adding like an adjunct kind of teacher, like a teacher's assistant. Yeah.
Right.
I think one of the important things to point out here is, okay, so why are the kids leaving, right? So the advocates of public education will say, well, the charter schools are taking these kids, and also now they get these $8,000 stipends to go to private schools, no matter what your income is. So people are fleeing the public schools. And the charter school advocates will say, well, public schools do better. And that's why kids are leaving. And that's where we are. So which side is right? That's up to other people to decide. But that's what's driving the argument right now.
Got an email from Mark. He said, is the school in Atlantic Beach set to close? That was kind of the one that we were referencing already. If not, why not? These school closures are bad all around. We are pouring money into charter schools that have no accountability and tend to teach skewed curriculum. And that's a conversation for another day. I do just briefly want to talk, because we only have a couple minutes left, about a decision by a Riverside community, Ashley, to pay for police protection. So they're basically saying King and Post has gotten rowdy at night. We want more officers, and they're going to kick in $10,000 to do it.
I know that our newsroom has heard from viewers for years about what goes on in Riverside. Now, it's interesting that this is a potential solution coming up, because I feel like this has been talked about for a number of years, and I'm interested to see where it goes. I know that our newsroom has heard about things like car break-ins, noise, partying, things of that nature. So I'm interested to see what happens with this, if it is, in fact, number one, feasible, and if they do see results from it. So it's something that I know we're keeping an eye on.
Riley, it's not unprecedented. I know that there was a time when Springfield, the SPAR organization, and I don't know if they still do it, but they paid for additional police protection for a period. It is an interesting option. I guess this is going to be matched by city money as well. So they're also going to throw in about $10,000.
Yes, and I believe it's only for a few months until December is when they'll be paying for the extra police protection. So I don't know if they think this will then just help deter people enough. So come the new year,
Mm-hmm.
things will be better. I'm not sure, but I know last summer, 5 Points, things got a little out of control in 5 Points, but some of the businesses there weren't exactly keen on having all the police presence.
All right. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. Riley Phillips, Ashley Harding, Will Brown, Ben Becker, thanks so much for being here this morning.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
Coming up next, the fight against heart disease hits the streets in an effort to garner attention. And
Bill presents the annual Great Cities Symposium on October 10th. Speaker Carol Coletta has led the transformation of downtowns, parks, and riverfronts across the U.S., from Memphis to Chicago. Join the community conversation. Tickets available at scenicjacksonville.org.
Wayne Hogan of the Terrell Hogan Personal Injury and Wrongful Death Law Firm. Serious injury cases are complex, and civil trial attorneys present the evidence juries need to see and hear. More at waynehogan.law.
Hi, it's Tom Hudson for the Florida Roundup. We are in a helicopter, just got back from flying over some mosquito breeding areas here in southwest Florida. Millions of dollars are spent trying to control these small bugs. So how bad are they in your neighborhood? Have you seen crews or helicopters spraying for them? Email us, radio@thefloridaroundup.org. Then be sure to join us back on the ground Friday, noon until 1.
Hi, I'm Regina Barber, co-host of Shortwave from NPR. Whether you're craving something sweet,
it tastes like a chocolate pastry,
or a savory,
we got 2 cases, so about 160 pounds of pork butts that we're getting ready to throw in the smoker.
NPR has you covered. Support the full spread of independent reporting and creative stories that satisfy every taste by giving to this station today. Here's how to donate.
Please call 353-9528 or visit us at wjct.org/radio.
The Secret Service faces fallout after a suspect is arrested in what officials say was another assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. Vice President Harris holds an event with the National Association of Black Journalists and a Zoom conference with Oprah. And the Fed cuts interest rates as Congress fails to pass a bill to fund the government. All that and more on the Friday News Roundup next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
And we're back. It's a little step, but it can have big consequences, and your 2 feet can make a big difference in it. Joining me to talk about the upcoming Community Heart Walk that the American Heart Association is hosting is Caitlin Brunel, Executive Director for First Coast American Heart Association. Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you.
And Dr. Sebastian Carrasquillo. He's a cardiologist at HCA Florida Memorial.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. So, Caitlin, heart disease is the leading cause of death in the United States. And it is something that affects almost everybody. What does this walk aim to do in terms of communicating and getting people involved and aware about the threat of heart disease?
Well, I want to mention that our Heart Walk is coming up on Saturday, October 5th at the Jacksonville Fairgrounds. And we're expecting nearly 20,000 people. And it's really amazing to see our community come together and prioritize our heart health by walking, having that physical activity. But it's also an opportunity to honor loved ones, those that are survivors of heart disease or stroke, or those that have unfortunately lost their lives to heart disease or stroke. You mentioned that it is the #1 killer, taking more lives than all forms of cancer combined. And so it's a really meaningful event where we see the First Coast community come together to prioritize our health and to continue to create that awareness of taking care of ourselves and taking care of others.
And Caitlin, you come to this with some personal experience of heart disease in your family. Some people may know your name because your dad is Mark Brunel. He's the former Jags quarterback and current quarterback coach for the Lions. But you've had a history in your family of heart disease and stroke.
Yes, my dad underwent an unexpected open heart surgery nearly 2 years ago. And so I say my why is continuing to evolve. When I started with the American Heart Association, I wasn't aware that heart disease was the #1 killer. And every day I'm inspired by individuals and families that have suffered from these diseases. And genuinely, I consider my job to be a privilege. And every day we want to continue to move the needle, change the narrative, and protect the hearts of those that we love within this community.
Dr. Carrasquillo, you're a cardiologist. What have you seen in terms of trends in your patients? Is this a disease that has remained static in terms of the challenges and the lifestyle issues that your patients um, have?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting with the way that medicine, technology, and treatment plans have evolved. That we're starting to see more of a chronic nature of these diseases as opposed to um, the acute events, right? So obviously, as our population continues to grow, these diseases become more prevalent. But with the advent of new technology and new medications, we're seeing sort of the later stages of these diseases, which is something that now we're kind of having to combat and learn how to treat. So it's been very interesting.
And so are you finding that the, diet, exercise still the primary triggers of heart problems? I mean, is that always what you're seeing in your practice?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like as a society, we put a lot of um, pressure into, okay, well, what medication is going to help me solve this issue? And ultimately, when you really sit down with the patient and you see the ones who do better are those ones that are more physically active, that are making the lifestyle changes with their diet, weight loss, and exercise. Because at the end of the day, sometimes we take a medication to fix one problem and it brings others upon us when the solution here is just a lifestyle change.
But there are some drugs that have been very effective, I think, right? As well.
Oh, absolutely. And, as physicians, we practice evidence-based medicine, and that means choosing certain medications that have shown to decrease mortality, decrease cardiac events. And, luckily we're living in a day and age where we have a lot of tools at our disposal to reverse pathologies and to improve quality of life. But at the end of the day, we want to focus on preventative medicine, right? Decreasing the cost burden in our society and improving our quality of life through lifestyle changes.
And Caitlin, this walk, I mean, it aims to bring attention to the issue of heart disease, and people get some exercise while they're doing it, but it is also is significantly a fundraiser.
Yes. So outside of the U.S. government, we are the largest organization that is funding cardiovascular research. And so the dollars raised, the individuals that are walking, that is going into research, advancing medical breakthroughs, furthering the education and awareness of CPR. And it's also driving equitable health for all people. So locally, our organization is really focused on the education and prevention of heart disease and stroke through maternal health, nutrition security, and tobacco and vaping cessation initiatives. And so this walk really allows us to further that work locally.
And so this walk is happening on Saturday. Is it something that ordinary people can participate in? I mean, how does the fundraising component occur?
So we're really grateful to have over 70 companies locally supporting our organization. We also have individuals that are fundraising, but it is open to the public. It is free to participate. So we welcome families, pets to come. As you mentioned, it is Saturday, October 5th at the Jacksonville Fairgrounds. The festival opens at 7:30 and the walk starts at 9 a.m.
Well, Caitlin Brunel, Dr. Sebastian Carrasquillo, thank you both so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
And that's our program. Thanks for listening. We encourage you to send your feedback.
First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
North Florida TPO, proud sponsor of WJCT's First Coast Connect, bringing to the community innovation in transportation planning, commuter services, clean fuels, and intelligent transportation systems. More at northfloridatpo.com.
Liberty Life, the pro-military paper and audio articles from Kings Bay to Camp Blanding. Serves Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Marines. Liberty Life is available wherever the military, veterans, and their families gather. Online at libertylifemedia.com.